I would like to introduce Captain Bruce Daniel. Bruce began his aviation career at Grand Central Airport in 1984. He gave me that date, so it's not me telling him he's old. He's launching his career, and it now spans over 4 decades. He expanded to helicopters in 1995, which is a great year for Henley, and has since built extensive experience across both fixed-wing and rotary aviation. He holds an airline transport pilot license, along with instrument and instructor ratings on both helicopters and fixed wings. Bruce has dedicated much of his career to training and mentorship, contributing significantly to instructor development across both aircraft and simulators. He is also a qualified CRM and fatigue risk management instructor. With over 25,000 hours, if I can just take a moment to pause dramatically, 25,000 hours, Bruce brings a depth of operational experience that very few in this room or many other rooms can match. Notably, he speaks with a very rare perspective on aviation safety. Bruce has survived 7 aircraft crashes and has lived to tell those tales. That experience continues to shape his commitment to learning and improving safety, and we thank him for it. For the past 5 years, Bruce has been serving Henley Air as chief pilot and joint head of training. His operational oversight spans chart operations, flight training, the HEMS operation, and rescue operations. Captain, you have control.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks a lot for coming. It's a great privilege to talk to you about safety. Just a couple of words about what has just been said. 25,000 hours means nothing, because today or tomorrow when we fly, we've got to do it right. And probably the balance of that is the 7 crashes. So clearly, you don't get it right all the time. So we must just always remember that we can always have something to learn, and that's why a symposium like this is really quite important to us. All right, practical aviation decision making. Who's ever heard that term? Probably very few of you, because you always hear aviation decision making. Why do you think that is? Because we as an industry are quite sainach, meaning that we are not going to spend too much money. So CRM and a lot of the systems in our aircraft was done to try and fix a problem with as little money as possible. Doesn't negate what it was about, but what it does mean is that we've got to become realistic. Decision making was at the end of that process and really started coming at the last generation of CRM, when they still found that there were holes. So then they started looking at decision making. They took a very theoretical approach to it, and then they thought we were done. But actually, we need to make it practical. We need to make it practical for us in the cockpit. So that's where it all started. So there's 3 aspects that we're going to go through. The first one is CRM itself, then what the manufacturer can do, and then decision making itself in making it into a practical situation. So first of all, before we get any further, who's done CRM? Who's done a CRM course? So every pilot has done a CRM course. Okay. How long was your initial CRM course? 3 days? 1 day? 5 days? Quite a varied amount of CRM. It also depended on how far the generation or the evolution of CRM went. So in a real world, we should actually have 5 days to do it, because everything builds on each one. So the first generation here was on behavior, leadership, and communication. So if you were to sum that up, it was teaching us to speak nicely to each other. But that's maybe not what we need. Because at some point in time in a cockpit, it's no longer just about speaking nice to each other, it's about effective communication. So they went a long way with the communication, how to communicate properly. So what is just as an aside, what is the definition of effective communication? Anybody? When has my communication been effective? It's only when the picture in my mind has been transferred to you and you have that same picture. The problem with that is that how do I know that you've now got the picture that I've broadcast? And that's the conundrum. So that's what first generation CRM tried to look at. Unfortunately, the accident rate did not reduce, and then we went to second generation, which was team and group dynamics. Things like how we operate in a team, what sort of personality types are we? And we found that wasn't even helpful because in different situations, my personality type changes. All right, so then we went along to third generation, expanded crew. This is probably the most, or the best single change in the situation, because we all of a sudden realized that we'd been talking about the crew and didn't worry about anybody else. But everybody else has a huge impact on the crew. So then it went wider to ground crews and everything, everybody around the machine. The fourth generation, third generation, we still had not done significantly change to the accidents. There was still the Megan's pilot era floating around, because it was easy, because apparently the pilot was always at the scene of the accident, which is quite strange, eh? So then we went to integrated training and SOPs. So then we thought, well, if we make enough rules, then the pilot doesn't have to it's a pre-made decision. So then we got SOPs and we got operation manuals. So operational manual before that for any organization was probably about this thin, maybe even the back of a cigarette box. Now that book can be 1,000, 2,000 pages long, because we thought if we give you a book, then it takes care of all the problems. Again, there was no change because that doesn't help. We live in a very dynamic situation. In the fifth generation, threat and error management. So that's when we started to really have a look and see what it is and being realistic, because all of the ones up until now thought that if we did this well enough, you wouldn't make a mistake. Unfortunately, we're human beings, so we do make a mistake. So this is when they said, what is a threat? What impact has a threat got on me? And what errors do I make? So somebody like Airbus company, who had probably one of the most integrated systems, they said that you could design out errors. Ultimately, what they then came up with, they said in any of their machines, which they said was earth-breaking, there was 3 consequential mistakes made every hour that the airplane flew. So if you think of a machine, we'll take the ultimate doing an ultra-long haul flight, that's 16 hours, times 3, that's a whole bunch of mistakes that are made. Daryl, what does that sum come to? I just wanted to check. No, that's just a personal thing. Because he always asks us questions like that about mental maths. I had to pick on you. All right, so threat and error management. That was the first time we started to have a reduction in accidents, or the avoiding of accidents. So we thought we were quite clever. Then, unfortunately, it didn't make any difference. So that's what we did on the soft skills side. And so the threat and error management, the last time that generation of CRM was changed was probably almost 20 years ago. So it's a long time now that there's been no further development. There was one further development which became aviation decision making, because it was quite a unique way that pilots solve problems. So that's when we started to realize. Now, decision making is quite a theoretical thing. It gives us all the bits and pieces, the building blocks, but it doesn't go all the way. So that's what we're going to attempt to do later on today. So that's what we did from the soft skill side from CRM. The aircraft manufacturers had been starting a whole lot earlier to try and help the pilot make decisions. So, have you ever seen a picture of Sikorsky's first helicopter? What did his flight controls look like? They were quite funny because there were a whole set of levers, got nothing to do with the direction that you're going to use them, and we realized that not everybody's going to be able to do that. So we started to modify cockpits to make them easy for us to operate as pilots. So that's how the manufacturers started to try and help us. If you've ever flown an early British machine, you will realize that that was built by an engineer, and all the flight controls he just threw into the cockpit, and wherever they landed, that's where we have. Whereas today, we have some of the more sophisticated machines that have done a lot to see what has actually in your eye line, where to put stuff and group stuff in the cockpit. So these are some of the things that the manufacturers did. So QRH, QRR. What is that? What is that? So that's our quick reference manual. So we have a situation, a technical issue with the machine, and we're going to go to this to solve our problem. So typically speaking, it's the emergency section of a flight manual. That's where we have it for singles and a lot of other helicopters. So you're expected to know all of those checklists. But they are checklists. Did you see anything about making a decision there? No, it's a checklist. So there's a checklist that for something, and it's very detailed as to how to do it. So one of the things that they do is they have a look at what we as human beings. If we get a fright, what happens to us? We go to flight, and then we don't think so straight. So that's where that checklist is written. It's written with recall items that you go to first. Once you've done the recall items, you can come and you can then take the checklist out, read the context, and that is to try and give your brain enough time to go back into a cognitive mode so you can start making decisions, because that's what comes next. So you read the end of the checklist, and that's where it ends. But again, it's just a checklist. It's done nothing about the decisions which actually have to follow, which is the important part. All right, so another thing that they started for the aviation is that they started flows. So what is a flow? Well, we'll do repetitively. We will start in this part of the machine. We'll go this way, then we'll go up here to here, then we'll go to here. Why is that? It's exactly what Megan was saying about acquired learning, that it's making a channel in our brain, a flow pattern in our brain. So that's how we can pick up any mistakes. We start reducing the errors because my hand knows where it's going, and it's muscle memory. So that's where they tried to help us to make a mistake. Did it help? Well, yes, it did help, but certainly nothing. We still were making mistakes and errors. Then we come to the master caution. So master caution was probably one of the better things that happened in the 70s. Machines in the 70s got master cautions. So this was a light in a position in your line of sight that if anything had gone wrong in a system, it came up. So this was the most important part of the development for our cockpits, because I had a central place and it was programming my mind. When the master caution comes on, you are trained straight away to identify it, to call it out, cancel it, and identify what the problem was. So we've actually then changed the way that you deal with stress, because now you've already taught. The master caution is, if it's a benign failure, if I see a master caution light come on, I already get a bit of an adrenaline rush because I've got to lift my performance. So it was a great issue. Also, what was nice about master cautions is that a light that was out of your view, that would come on, but you wouldn't see it. So the master caution alerts you, now you've got to try and find it. So that was a great practical way of trying to help us with our decision making. Lights out philosophy. This is just one of the philosophies that was made from a manufacturer. This manufacturer particularly said that if everything is fine, there's going to be no lights on, which is a great plan. So if you then have a problem, then lights will come on. So that was also a great plan. But then if you have certain electrical problems, some of those lights aren't powered. So it looks like you're in a great place, but you're not. So all of these systems that we have all have faults in them. The last one which I developed then was route training. So that mandatory route training only started probably about 15 to 17 years ago. So this meant that when we did a conversion to a type of machine, we would then have to operate it under supervision, because then we could do some of the practical training. and start making those knowledge loops. What's a knowledge loop? Well, if I do this, this is what happens, and that's going to be the result. So now all of a sudden, if I've got a whole bunch of knowledge loops, when I need to make a decision later on, I can pick up a loop, and I've got everything that comes with that, which makes my decision making a lot quicker and more effective. So that's what the manufacturers did. They started that sometimes on their own, but then these guys are the guys that mandated it. So ICAO. So ICAO, we all know, is a faraway place, and we think it's Montreal, we think it's the United Nations building. Well, that's actually where ICAO falls under. So they then started to legislate what it is that we need to do to help the pilot to make a decision. So, for instance, in our cockpits, we have a yellow warning light and a yellow warning light. Now, I need somebody to tell me, please, what does a red warning light mean? Sorry, Benek, where's the microphone? Because I need an answer from this. Who knows what the red light means? Come on. Yes? Sorry? Okay, just hold on. We'll just get that mic for everybody. Sorry about that.
Okay, I'm Major E. Collins. A red light is a warning light that indicates that if nothing is done, there could be loss of life.
Loss of life.
Or equipment.
Sorry, where do you work? Because I'd like to employ you. You're one of the first pilots that have ever said that outright. So yes, it's not something that the actual particular manufacturer decided on. ICAO designated what it is. So the red light means immediate action is required, can lead to loss of life. So that already tells me what sort of value I should put on it. Then we add to that, which needs to be one of the knowledge loops that you come to, that if you've got a red light and you need to talk to ADC, how do we talk to ADC? So we don't say, Hotel Delta Bravo, we've got a small engine problem, but can we go? No, we don't do that. There's a specific way we do it. And South Africans and all pilots are very terrible, because what do? We kind of downplay it because it's not cool to sound like you're losing your rag. However, what we should be doing is saying Mayday, 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 and doing the whole Mayday call, because that helps us to get perspective for the ADC, our fellow aviators that are in the air, but also helps me. Because if I've got a fright because we've got a master warning has come on, or there's been a light, or there's been a bang, I need to get back to where I'm getting back to cognitive thinking. And that's where we need to go, because that's when I'm going to be able to make decisions. Up until then, your decision making is not complete. Have you seen crashes at air shows? So it's an extreme example, but what happened with air shows is that pilots were doing air shows, they were doing a demonstration, and then they land up crashing at some point. 90% of those crashes were spur-of-the-moment decisions. So the best one, to example, a few years ago there was a Hawk Hunter displaying in the UK, and the final thing, he did a loop, ran out of energy, hit the ground. So by then they'd already started to implement that as a display pilot, you've got to show everybody what your display is, and you stick to that. There's a safety officer that can say knock off, so if you deviate, he's going to tell you knock off, you go to level wings and you land. All that happened was, in that situation, in practicing, he was running out of energy. So while he was flying, he knows it looks good, so he says, well, I'll do it because I'll sort it out. What is that? Well, there's adrenaline going, so your logical ability to think, your cognitive ability to think dissipates, and then you can make errors. So that's where we were on the practical side. So to pick up with what Megan said, the fundamental problem is the pilot. I'm a pilot, so that hurts. Just like telling me I'm too old hurts. Thank you very much indeed. So the fundamental problem is the pilot, but it's not really. We've got to understand what's happening to the pilot and make some methods for us to negate that. So we're not going to spend too much time here. Pilots are affected by emotions. If you've just had a an argument with someone, how emotional are you? How able to think are you? I guess the best is when a pilot and ATC have a go at each other on the air, because we've got to show that we are right. And we're all A-type personalities, all control freaks, so we've got to show that we are right. So the underlying thought is, I'll show you. Not a very clever place to be, because your subsequent decisions are going to be tainted. All right, so emotions play a huge part. Fatigue. Well, the best part about fatigue, I think, is for sleep. When you do sleep, if you are sleep deprived, that means 3 days of not proper sleep. If you're awake for 16 hours, it's the same as you've got an alcohol level of 0.08, the old limit for being drunk. So it's crazy because you can't come to work drunk, but I will work you hard enough until you behave like you're drunk. Not really very clever. All right, then the startle effect. This is probably one of the hardest ones for us to deal with. At this point in time, there was going to be a thunder flash or some sort of loud percussion behind you to show you the startle effect. But I decided, seeing as we have got some military here, I might get shot by some 9mm, so we've dispensed with that, okay? But what happens with a startle? That's when you go to that flight or fright mode. And so we've got to get past that and be able to get past that. Megan touched on it as well. We call that resilience training. So that's part of where the fourth generation of CRM came in. They started using simulators to build our resilience. So our ability to bounce back, which really becomes quite important as pilots, that we've got to get past what the initial problem is, get into that thinking mode so we can make the next decisions, because they're the ones that are going to be quite important. All right, so with decision making, we then came to where we really needed to do. We became management models. How are we going to actually manage our cockpits? Because that is where the crux of the matter is. All of the other things we're talking about is theory, but we need to put it into a practical place. And so there are different models that are made. Same thing as mental models is the same issue. So just to pause a bit on mental models, they're quite important for us in dealing with an emergency. Let's just go back to an auto-rotation. So all of us are trained, all of us did auto-rotations, so that would be an emergency situation. So typically speaking, that would be a red light. How do we train that? Well, we train that as soon as you've had the engine failure, you're going to go down on collective, you're going to adjust your speed for whatever speed, you're going to come back up to the collective, and you're going to sit with an RPM. Then after that, you're now going to start looking for a place to land. So what did we achieve there? Because it's a rote exercise, we get all the muscle memory working, so when it happens, I know what my cues are. Even if I'm a bit stuttery in my brain, I know that that's what comes next. Okay, so then we go to what we really wanted, is that once we got past the initial stage, now we just go to an abnormal situation. Because I've trained it, I know that I can go that far. So now we're getting back to where I can start thinking and making the right decision about selecting my LZ, and heaven forbid, but at the last minute deciding that LZ's not good enough, but having had enough options to say, I'm going to go to the left. In the old days, we used to say if a guy changed his emergency point, we failed him, which is a bit silly, because you should still keep your mind going, so that if it's not going to work on that, you must have another option. All right, so those are mental models. So mental models are quite a difficult thing, because we can't all decide on a model, because we all think differently. We're also in different operations. So what needs to happen is that your flight partners where you fly from or operate with needs to come up with a model that works for you and works for your operation. So what I'm going to put down here is some basic models that we're going to use. Yours might deviate, but the basic format or flow needs to be this. So the first thing we've got to do is we've got to join a political party. So we've got to do A and C. So we'll get to that shortly. Then we're going to identify, verify. And then we're going to do the QRH thing. And then we're going to have T4 deck is where we're going to go to next. Okay, so this is not a political rally. So this is a rhythm that must be set up, and a knowledge loop that must be set up in your brain. Because this is how we're going to get through making a decision. The T4 deck is where we land up with the actual decision being made. All right, let's just break that down into what it really means. Let me just, go further back. All right, so the A and C part. What does that mean? The initial part, I'm going to get a warning, or I'm going to be alerted. There's going to be a bang, or whatever the trigger point is going to happen. At that point, I need to join the ANC, which means I have to aviate. So I have to fly. So it doesn't help that I do any of the fancy things in life, but I lose control of the helicopter. The most important thing in the helicopter is an unstable platform. So after 3 oscillations, you're going to lose control. So it's important that you physically go and you spend your time after you had the fright of actually flying the machine. Then you've got to point it in a direction, so you're going to need to navigate it. So this is all buying you time to get your machine under control, and you're lengthening your lifespan. And then you're going to decide to communicate. At this point in time, you may communicate with a fellow crew member or may communicate outside the helicopter. That is your decision to make. Most times, that is the third thing on the list. It's not really that important in my book, because I've got to keep the thing on level flight, and I need pointing in a direction, and then I've got some other stuff to do. So that's the one we tend to get hung up with sometimes in making this perfect radio message, but that's not actually what it's about. All right, then we identify and verify. This becomes really important. We have to identify what the problem is. So our manufacturer, as we said before, helps us because there'll be a red light and amber light. What happens if there's a red light and an amber light? Which one do you do first? With some systems, you will get maybe 3 lights that come on, 3 amber lights, and 1 red light. What is it that the manufacturers try to do for us there? It's going to prioritize for us. I should not be doing an amber light if there's a red light. I really need to be doing the red light. So, and many times the red light has actually put on other amber lights. When you deal with it, the red light might go out, but it'll pull up another amber light because you're not finished. That's their way of deciding how it all works. So we're going to first identify it. We need to verify it. So we need to verify that what is actually the point. So this is the first time that we're starting to need cognitive ability. Because now I have to interrogate it. So I've got a light that says, let's say it was connected to oil pressure, low oil pressure. And now I need to have a look at it, and I have, okay, what's happened to the pressure? What's happened to the temperature? I need to interrogate to try and understand. So that's to start getting me into a cognitive frame of mind. After we've done that, we take a deep breath, and then we do the QRH, or the actual active. A great adage it used to be, so this is to show you my age, used to say in a jumbo jet that if something happens, the first thing the captain does, he pushes his chair back and lights up a cigarette, and then talks to the engineer. So yes, it's good to take a breath and get going. All right, so the QRH is the actual procedure that we're going to follow, or the out of our head or out of that. So again, we're going to complete the QRH. So we've done what the manufacturer have said we've got to do. Now comes the time we're going to have to start making decisions. So all of what we did now is to get us to this point. So we're now going to use a model T4 deck. Okay, what's this model? Well, and where did it come from? Well, this model is actually mostly done by EASA, and the Europeans did a lot of the work. It was modified by NASA. They had some part to it. The only thing that's different with here is the particular company I work for is that they put the T. So you'll see 4-deck all over the show, but the T was something that the company that we worked with put in there. So this is what it means. Does anybody know what it is? What it means? Okay. So the first one is time. So the first thing you need to do is decide how much time have I got. So if I've got a lot of time or if I've got a little time, it really means a big difference as to what process I'm going to follow. So if, it's a bit backwards to do it this way, if I've got little time, I can't go through this whole process. So what I do is I take a shortcut there and I go to experience. If I've got experience, I now need to act immediately. So I'll decide. So I'll go from the time to the decide or the D. Because this is typically an auto rotation. There's no time for thinking about all the bits and pieces and how my mother feels about me or whatever. Now we have to go straight into action. All right, so that's the first departure, and that's going to decide whether we start with the F or we start with the D. All right, so the next thing is the facts. So now we start gathering facts. We need to see where it is we are, what's actually happening with the machine, what's my situational awareness about what's outside, what are my options, where geographically am I, how important is this to get on the ground? Have I got to land as soon as possible, or is this a land at my convenience? So this is where we're going to gather the facts. It's important that we take a bit of time for that. Most pilots, when you have an emergency situation, rush themselves. Don't rush yourself. Get those facts. It's important, because if you overlook one, it could be quite an important fact that you overlook. All right, so we now gathered the facts. And now we develop options. Just for the English people here, option or options. We want more than one option. A strange thing when you do the research on it, if a pilot or a crew come up with 4 options, a large percentage of the time, the first option you come up with is the one you'll end up going with. But it doesn't negate the fact that you need more options. Because by looking at more options, it's helping your brain think of things that you have not thought of. With those options, you need to run the scenario forward and backwards in your head. So from where I am now, I'm going to go all the way down. What does it mean for the cruise? What does it mean for the descent? What does it mean for the landing? What does it mean after the landing? We never ever think about that one. That can actually be the most critical thing, because if it's burning, you need to get away from it. It's no good sitting there. All right, so we've got to generate some options. How do we do this? Well, there's also another model. These models that I'm talking about today is not set in stone. You may have your own model to put in for that, but you must have a model. So when I'm dealing with options, the way that I test my options is I join football club, PSL, so the Football League in South Africa. So the first thing I say when evaluating my options is it possible? Can I actually do what I think I'm going to do now? All right, it's not what I want, it's can I do it? Typical thing, if we go back to auto rotations, because that's very big in our minds, it's no good I've got a perfect field that's 300 meters further than I need to go. So we'll have a look at if it's possible. Then we look and see whether it's safe. Because I've got 4 options, what's going to be the safest one for me to use? That's taking into account all the other considerations. Then the last one, is it legal? Okay, so this is the one I'll get into trouble from. Sorry, Emil. So is it legal? Well, at this point in time, legalities are not high on my list, because I need to be breathing at the end of this. So it doesn't mean that we just throw the law out, but we need to take cognizance of it, because we're going to have to defend it. But if our options are wildly out of the law, that should be a trigger for us to say, actually, is there a problem? All right, and so that's how we'll deal with the options. The last part of the options we're going to look at is we're going to look at what the risks and benefits are. So the risks and benefits, this is how we're going to rank them. So if I continued, let's say I had an engine failure, which did happen to one of our pilots, north of Oliver Tambo, loses a motor, has got a twin-engine machine, weather's bad. What are his options? Well, you can go to Oliver Tambo. You can land in someone's back garden, slide it on because it's a 20 and it's got skids, so it's going to slide on. So you can land where he thinks is a place, or he can continue to rand. So what are the options? What are the risks? What are the benefits? So in that situation, you're going to look at the task you get safely on the ground. You're going to look at individual needs, and you have to have group needs. Sometimes group needs at that point become quite important. So in that case, they elected to come on to RAND, because this is with the base, this is where the maintenance is going to take place, and logistically it's the best place for us to do it. So we've got to have a look at the benefits and risks, bearing in mind the PSL. This is a wonderful part just to stop at. So the experience or the previous knowledge loops. This is where I said right in the beginning, if it's a short time, I'm going to drop down to here to experience. If I've got an experience knowledge loop, I can execute that because of time. So the experience is also here as a check for me. Am I now going to have to show my brilliance and my experience? That's maybe not a great plan. A great plan would be one where I don't have to show my ability to fly. So that's a last chance filter for myself. Then we decide on what it is that we're going to do, and we start to execute it. So at this point, everybody thinks they've done, but we're not done. This is now the hardest part of the whole exercise. Is now we've got a plan, we've gone through this whole process, and now we're going to execute that plan. It's not over why. Because if I have a plan, and I'm going to do this, this, and this, now I'm starting to execute it, but now this fact is no longer here, and this one over here is no longer here. Have I still got a plan? No, I'm now starting to modify the plan that I had, and at some point, I'm no longer flying on the plan. I'm now flying something really different that I haven't thought about. Very, very dangerous place to be. So in evaluating how I'm doing, I need to have a point in saying, okay, I've got 3 things. This is no longer my plan. I need to reassess whether this is the right idea. Very hard thing to do, because if I come up with a plan, I obviously thought it was the best idea, but maybe then not at the time. My wife will tell you otherwise, but that's different. So on the way down, we've now got to check that our plan is going according to plan. All right. So that's the procedure, or the practical decision making. So this is a model, a mental model that you have to have. And if you've grooved this model like this in your head through simulator work, or all your simulations are done this way, it'll help you to be able to make a better decision. By the way, since the 121 operators put this type of a model into place, it had a real effect on outcomes. Okay. Any questions? Daryl. Oh, sorry, wisdom. Sorry about that. Daryl, I'm sorry to spring the maths on you. I'm really sorry. Please don't get me back.
Bruce, thanks for springing the maths on me. A couple of weeks ago, Bruce and I and a lady were involved in interviewing pilots. And Bruce made the incredible admission, listen to this very carefully, that despite having 25,000 hours of flying, you must treat every flight with 100% respect, despite 25,000 hours. Bruce, thanks for putting me in the spotlight earlier. What is 7 times 12?
I have no idea at this point in time. 84.
Now, anyway, on your slides you referred to first generation.
Yes.
As leadership and behavior and communication. Despite that, would you agree that those subjects still need to be very much in our mental models? Absolutely.
I think the biggest point about CRM was when we started to look at the softer skills that are required, those were some of the immediate fixes they thought. If we understood that, we would help ourselves to reducing the accidents. So none of those generations are mutually exclusive. They actually all build on something, on each other. And those are the fundamentals, and you will draw on those all the way through in your interaction. So one of the things they talked about, they had interaction, so they would say something like seeking information. How many times when I'm discussing something do I seek information? How many times do I suggest? So those are fundamentals, because that becomes very important, the way that we communicate, the way that everything else builds onto that. So a good example of that would be, how many ears have you got? Anybody? Megan, 2. Oh, sure. How many mouths have you got? 1. So maybe I should be listening twice as much as talking. So in any given situation, maybe I need to listen first before I know. And for us, it's normally the best way out is to first ask a question. So thanks for that, Daryl. Yes, it is fundamental. That's why a CRM program, if you're doing it properly, should be 5 days. Any further questions? Oh, thanks, Buddha. You're still quite quick between the wickets, eh? Okay, I'm going to get into trouble for that. That's fine.
My name is Ivor Heyman. I don't know if you're the right person to ask, but I'm just going to see if you can assist. With all these emergency procedures, we don't do them often enough. You were talking about auto-rotations as an example. It's a very good example. Every time we do them, we're not fresh anymore. And the problem is that we haven't built the muscle memory that we need to do it effectively. So my question to you is, how do we combat that situation? I mean, one thing could be that you do it more often, but as often as we do it, it doesn't seem to be often enough.
It's a very good question. So if you go back to one of Megan's slides when she was talking about recency, that is also very true for how we learn. So if I attend a lecture today and I've paid attention, I'll have, let's say, 80%, 90% retention. How long does that last? Well, if I don't go back to it, after a day, I'm back down to 80%, so it reduces. If I go back to it after within 24 hours, I will bring it back, if I've got good notes, back to 90, 95%. Then you double it again. If you revisit it 2 days later, then 4 days later, then a week, 2 weeks later. That's the key to getting to 70% or 75% pass rates, because we've made that mental model in our brain, and we've actually changed the channels of the way we think. So that's the way to do it. So for auto-rotations, it's very important that you spend enough time doing them to groove yourself. And so when you're involved with an organization, the best measure would be when you do a 6-monthly progress test, that what's the chance of you doing it right the first time? If you are not getting it right the first time, means you haven't grooved it, which means you've got to go and do it. Once it's been grooved, it becomes really instinctive, and that's what you want. So when you do PPCs, pilot proficiency checks, that's one of the things we need to look at. One of the operations I was involved with was doing a backup of an elevated pad. So you back up off the pad, you have an engine failure, and you've got to come down and land on the pad. Because it's a pad, you can't overrun it, so things are not going to be great. So if a pilot couldn't get that right on the first time at his PPC, means that there's something wrong with our training. Because he needs to be able to get that right, simply because in real life, he gets one chance at it. There are some things that are in our favor, because in real life, I couldn't care less about the helicopter. Sorry, Butter. It's about keeping the skin between my ears alive. So we will go to further than the limits. Thanks. Any questions? Any further questions? All right. Thank you. Oh, sorry. One more. Let's get the mic there. I'm actually quite scared now because you gave a very intelligent question the other day.
I'm Major E. Collins. From your experience, what decision-making errors are most common among low-level helicopter pilots, and how can we proactively address them?
That's a really good question. I think the only way to answer it is to look at your initial training. So I don't think that there's a simple answer to that. I think it looks to your initial training. If your initial training has been about just getting it done and not making those models in your brain and putting those loops in place, there's a million things that'll hurt you. I think probably the most, for low-time pilots, the biggest contributor is when they go off script. So I've been taught that a circuit is like this. Now I'm away and I've got some friends, and now I'm going to make it a short circuit because I'm flipping, I'm going to do some rides. So now I go off script and I don't do something that I'm trained to do and always did. That's when we're going to have a mistake, because we haven't planned it properly, and we are going away from script. Is there anything wrong with flipping? No. But you need to have thought about it first and practiced it first before you do it. So it's when you go off script, so you're trying to do something that you didn't really plan on. That's probably the biggest contributing factor. Any questions, guys and girls? Thanks a lot. Thank you very much indeed.